Cool. Then I call this meeting to order at 6:03 p.m. Can I get the approval of the agenda? Can I get a seconder? And can someone also let Marie in? Matthew seconds. Okay. Okay. If there's no objections, I'll take the agenda as is. Moving on to the territorial acknowledgement. The Board of Directors acknowledges that the University of Waterloo is on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Our organization operates on the Haldeman Tract, land promised to 6 nations, which includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. Oral conflict of interest declaration. The chair poses the following question in relation to any items of business on the agenda for this meeting. Does any director have an actual, perceived, or potential conflict of interest? I will flag myself as potentially having a conflict of interest for the ratification of the election results. Jay has noted in the chat that he also has a conflict of interest there. Catherine as well. Okay. Dowd also, although I'm admittedly kind of confused how that applies, but okay. Okay. I'll just ask for, I'm gonna say that it's probably appropriate for you not to vote. I probably think you can ask some questions around the approval of the election results. I don't think that majorly influences things. So if there's no more conflict of interest declaration, we're going to move on to reports. So I guess we'll start with my report first. Actually, let's start with Denver's report first because I need to pull up my report and remind myself what was in it.
Yeah, I also do want to apologize to folks. I thought I sent it to Esther and I did not. So I have circulated it. This one looks a little different than previous. Just want to start off with that because I believe committees are supposed to be done through our board members' reports. So I have a little bit talking about that, but some big focuses governance-wise have been policy manual. I've been like kind of co-taking the lead with Steph on that, at least from board side, in talking about like ways that we're getting through this. I've also been trying to gather a lot of info wherever I can from staff because I've been generally leading those sessions. Transition, we have a new Pres VP, woot woot. We had some conversations previously about how to transition those folks in. I believe Mike's already reached out. Steph and I are going to be reaching out shortly. We have.
Can someone
not being able to hear?
Who's the owner for the meeting? I believe you have to let Marie into the meeting.
Anything that shows that she's not granted access to the meeting. So I can't see how to add that to the meeting. But ideally, she should be able to join without someone adding that to the meeting.
Jay, would you be able to maybe type in the chat how you managed to get in? I think that might be helpful to Marie.
I just found the number on the meeting invite and call the number and enter the phone conference ID. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hi, yeah, sorry. I think we're just typing in the chat because Marie can't hear us.
I use a Kitchener number because I'm in Kitchener Waterloo right now.
Is now joining.
Oh, I think she's in now.
Marie, can you hear us?
Marie, if you can hear us, clap once. Okay.
Sweet.
Marie says she's
Okay.
in.
Awesome. I'll just dive back in where I was, Steph.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Next piece. So around advocacy, we have a GA coming up. Only had 6 folks at training, including myself and Steph. So we have to do some catch-up trainings. Overall, we're still 2 members short, I believe, Steph.
We're only 1 member short now.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, if anybody knows anyone, please. As for municipal affairs, Town and Gown again hasn't done a whole lot. We've had a couple cancellations, but they have asked about a survey. Sorry, this didn't make it into the report because they just asked over the last couple days. But there is a survey going out to all students. Probably mid-March about housing, and that information is going to help guide the City of Waterloo in what they're going to do around the housing crisis. As well, we've been working pretty diligently on Stratford campus trying to get connected there. I think all levels of government are pretty on board that we should be helping the Stratford campus to grow. Right now, there's a significant issue around the affordability of that program for folks. Folks are spending $10 a day each way on busing, and just generally there's not the supports there. So we're approaching a couple different ways. One of the ways is looking at some sort of WUSA bus or WUSA bringing some bargaining to try and help in the meantime, but housing's the big goal. There's talks of putting a residence right behind the campus. And I think the city and all levels of government are on board. So it just resides pretty well with the City of Waterloo at this point. As for federal affairs, UCREW, I drove home that we need a meeting for UCREW, or need a budget for UCREW, or need to change the way it operates. I prepared some budgets for them at $1 student, 75 cents, 50 cents, 25 cents. I think this got like a lukewarm response, honestly. And then since then we just met, and I think folks are interested in having talks about like what is UCREW going to do more holistically, I think, before budget. So I don't think we've solved anything, but I think it kind of got us a step in the right direction. And if we move on to the last section, did some campus lunches with Steph and our events folks. They went really well compared to last semester, so I was really excited about that. We've touched base with GR a couple times. We had a bit of an awkward interaction there, but I think things are fine. And I still have a Twitter that I'm not using enough. So comment and interact with me. Make me use it.
Cool. Do we have any questions for the VP? Technically not VP, but still VP.
I will pose a question for folks. If you have a clever alternate meaning of VP, toss it in the chat. If you're just looking for something to do, I'd love to hear your ideas.
Okay. Okay, seeing none, gonna move back to my report now. Hello, again, tried to be fairly exhaustive in my report, so I'll just point to a couple things that are relevant. Had a conversation with the lawyers about the honoraria for the officers, and basically figured that out. We're going to have to run Senate elections soon, or at least the by-elections. Sort of the three biggest things to note from me. Doing some work with COPS, just around what COPS looks like in the future. There's been some recognition of Policy 42 working in very funny ways as it applies to student groups. So the Campus Life Department is trying to help us figure that out so that we're better able to support student leaders and get more clarity around how a lot of things work. So we're developing sort of strategy for there. Also am working with the societies because there's currently a lack of any process if there's any I guess misconduct or like governance issues that are happening at the society level. An at-large student really has no recourse other than engaging with that society itself. And I think that there's some openness both on WUSA's end and the society's end to have some sort of I guess, ability for COPS to intervene and to receive grievances. So we're going to be working with the lawyer to figure that out and working with COPS to identify how that process will work as well, just to bring in a little bit more transparency and certainty in the decisions that the societies are making. Also on top of that, working hopefully with finance over the next bit to streamline the way that society budgets are approved. Currently, they're approved by the president, not approved, but like declared whether or not they're complete. Some of them are very good budgets. Other ones are a little bit lacking. So there might be some need for us to provide some better training or templates for the societies. It's really a mixed bag. But they're an important financial tool to ensure that student fees that are collected for the purposes of the societies to run events or provide services are used for those students. So working away on that. Other major thing, changes to a bunch of auxiliary fees and the tuition framework sort of occurred at Board of Governors. So Matthew Caffern and myself, given some guidance from the AC, sort of spoke to our concerns about the possibility of differential tuition for out-of-province students. So there's a little bit more of that in my report as well. Do I have any questions from folks? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the Executive Director report. Suzanne, do you have anything to add on top of your written report?
My apologies, I didn't realize I was muted.
Oh, okay.
I was talking away and going, and does anyone have any questions? And I hear nothing. And I was like, okay, so then anyway, sorry about that. I wasn't planning on going through each of the sections. I'm hoping everyone had an opportunity to look through the report, and I'm happy to take any questions. Kumar and Dave are also, I believe, on the call. And so if there's questions pertaining to their areas, they'll step in if I'm not giving you the full in-depth answer you're looking for. So
is now exiting.
We seem to have lost someone. I hope they find their way back. Do folks have any questions for Suzanne? Catherine?
Can you hear me okay? Am I audible? Or is that not?
Barely. You're going to have to, like, speak up.
Okay. Is this any better?
Close enough. Go ahead.
Okay. I was just gonna, okay, I'll figure out the audio situation. I was just gonna ask, off the top of your head, if you have any sense with Flux.stop how like the physical location is keeping up with demand?
Suzanne, did you catch that?
I think I did. Thanks, Catherine. I don't know, Kumar, if you wanted to step in and provide some.
Yeah, I
information
kind
on
of, as mentioned in the report, we're seeing some record traffic and visitors daily to that store. So that is something that we are, reviewing in terms of what's next. So some of the business plans that we'll be bringing forward to board for the future of Flock Stop as we kind of develop that beyond Flock Stop, the temporary placeholder business model, is going to be addressing that. But it is quite challenging. The store is quite small, and I mean, if you visited during between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m., it's the lineups get quite extensive. We're still moving our visitors, within 2 or 3 minutes max, but it's not a pleasant experience, especially if you do require accessibility. It's quite tough to navigate through. But we are drawing up some solutions in our business plan as we move forward that we'll be bringing to the board shortly.
Kumar.
Catherine, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Awesome. Do you have any other questions for Suzanne? I guess I'm just gonna ask one. Was wondering if you could provide an update just regarding that everything's on track for the general meeting, like the logistics for that.
I'll have to be honest with you. I can't answer that, Steph. I don't know
That
whether
would
that's
be-
an
sorry,
Esther question.
yeah,
Might be
that-
able to. Sorry.
Yeah, that won't be Susan. It's myself and Mike that
Okay.
are working with marketing and other units. So we're setting up a meeting for early next week. And then they've already started, I think Mike has already started working on the food and refreshments, and he's booked the venue for the meeting already. So there are things already in place. So the meetings, and then we'll be meeting weekly, like what we did when we had like an elections planning team. So we'll be meeting weekly as well to make sure that everything's in order for the general meeting.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. Seeing no other questions, directors, is there anything you folks would like to highlight specifically in your reports? Going once.
Hello. Sorry. Hi.
Hi.
So I could not press the unmute button for some reason. Yes. I just wanted to see if we wanted to talk about the 3.3% turnout at the elections at some point. I wasn't sure what the right place to bring that up was, but it's not really a nice thing, and we should probably think about it at least a little bit, because it seems like turnout went down.
Yeah, so we can probably add that to new business if that's all right with you.
Yeah, I wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to make it new business. I was thinking it might be somewhat relevant to the standing item we have about student communication, but I don't know. What do you think is more sensible?
I think it might make sense to add it as new business. I don't think we have any more updates on the communication with student governance and at-large body portion, and I think people are interested in having a conversation about it. So I think it makes the most sense as new business, frankly.
Sounds good. Yep, that's all I had.
Okay, cool. Okay. Seeing no more reports, I guess we'll move on to item 4.1, approval of the minutes for the meeting held on February 9th. So do I have a mover and a seconder for that? Okay, Dowd moves. I get like another hand, please. Okay, Matthew seconds. Okay. Okay, so that item I'm going to take by consensus unless anyone has any issues with the minutes. Moving on to ratification of election results. I'm just going to take myself as the mover. Do we have a seconder? Matthew seconds. So yeah, ratification of the election results. Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to add that in the briefing notes I prepared, there's an aspect that wasn't captured where we touched base with the lawyers, and they mentioned that because the bylaw makes reference to just the general meeting regarding the approval, that even if board ratifies it now, it will still need to go to the general meeting for it to be approved. So just wanted to chip that in, because the way it's currently couched, it sounds more like if it's ratified by the board here, then it might not need to, because that was the way the ERP was drafted. But the lawyers pointed out that despite that since the bylaw didn't make reference to board or didn't make reference to the board, then it will still need to go to the general meeting. So the reason why I think it might be prudent for the board to still ratify here is because it gives the opportunity for the incoming directors to at least start some sort of transitioning, like the training that would likely come up on the 11th of March. If it's approved here, they can possibly attend those that will be available to attend, and then any other transition thing, like informal things that we can probably start even before the general meeting takes place, can already begin to happen. So that's just what I wanted to add.
Just a question for you, Esther. I know what we heard back from the lawyers is that like you can't do a switcheroo with any of the names on the floor. But it seems to be the case that like you can like amend the motion to remove a name. So I guess I'm wondering when it comes to the officer contracts, if that's something that we should be worried about.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question. Like,
I think it's still a possibility to maybe this is actually okay. I'm gonna leave this for confidential session. Actually.
Okay.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions about the ratification of the election results?
Yes, I do have a question.
Shoot.
Should the general meeting ratify the result rather than the board of directors?
So historically, the board has ratified the result. Like there's a requirement in the our elections and referenda procedure that either board or the GM need to ratify the result, but ultimately the board is elected at a GM. So we can still ratify the results here and then skip ratifying it at the GM, but we still have to have the motion to elect the officers and the directors to their roles.
Okay.
Okay. If there's no other discussion on this item, I'll ask for folks in favor of ratifying the results. Please raise your hand. And if you're on the phone, I would suppose you type into the chat. I see 3 in favor. Okay. Everyone opposed, please raise your hand. Everyone abstaining, please raise your hand. Okay. Motion passes. Okay. Moving on to approval of dates for by-elections. So the way that Senate by-elections work is that in order to trigger a by-election, students need to submit a petition to the Secretariat in order to trigger one. So we received an email from the Secretariat that we were able to trigger by-elections for the at-large. Still waiting to hear back about the Health Senate, so that's something that we'll figure out hopefully before the opening of the nomination period. But these are the dates that were prepared by Esther. They are partially like restricted in that they can't occur during spring term. But if folks are comfortable with this date, then we can move to approve them. Okay. Any questions, comments, concerns on this one? Okay. Seeing no comments, can I get anyone opposed to please raise your hand? Can I get anyone abstaining to please raise your hand? Okay. Then motion passes. Moving on to review of agenda items for the general meeting. Okay, so basically we have to send the agenda to members 2 weeks prior to the meeting. So we will have to vote online to approve the agenda. Alana, or who's ever controlling the thing, would you be able to open up my brief on this? Scrolly, scrolly, scrolly. Scrolly, scrolly, scrolly. Okay. Cool. Can you scroll down to the specific motion? Okay. Yeah. So specific motion is this. So it's going to be a mixture of, well, okay. Before we move to that motion, I guess I'm going to break this up into 2 parts. One of them is just a preliminary discussion of what we would like to be part of the agenda. Next one is actually having a discussion about the motions at hand. So if we could scroll up a little bit. Okay. So these are the things that I've listed sort of on our end as a board. Obviously, these need a little bit more fleshing out, but is anyone opposed to any of these things? Slash, is there anything that I'm missing? And this is not including member proposals. So is everyone okay with these being the preliminary thing for the board submitted agenda items? Okay, I am seeing nodding, so I will take that as is. Okay, so moving on to discussion on the actual sort of recommendations here. So basically just setting up the president and the governance manager to prepare the GM agenda, and that approval of the agenda may take place over e-vote, and also that we are interpreting Board Procedure 26 so that WUSA directors retain WUSA counselors' right to hold up to 5 proxies. Do we have a seconder on that motion? Angela seconds. Okay. Do we have any discussion on that item? Going once. Going twice. Okay. I will take that motion by consensus, unless there's any objections or amendments folks would like to add right now. Okay, I am seeing none, so we shall scrolly along. Suzanne, I guess this would be you. Sorry. Okay, so I'll move. Do we have a seconder for this? So the motion is, be it resolved that the WUSA Board of Directors approves the creation of a third higher level position within the accounting department. Be it further resolved that the WUSA Board of Directors approves the necessary funding for this position. So Matthew has seconded it. Suzanne, would you like to speak to that item?
Sure, I would. I guess the majority of this motion actually comes forward from our previous financial officer. Her and I had been discussing looking at creating this third role. So we currently have 2 financial analyst roles. We'd be adding a third financial analyst role to help with some of the backlog of the tasks that are noted there, as well as that would help free up the time of the financial officer once they're onboarded and trained to help us with some of the other strategic things, whether it's capital fund or looking at strategies for the bomb shelter lounge project. Those kinds of things would just be off the top of my head. So, and in terms of funding, realistically, the board would be approving funding for probably about 1 month because I don't think we'd be able to get anybody in place before then. But from an ongoing perspective, we do have the funds, as well as there'll be an excess carry forward from some of the vacancies from this past year. So I'll open up that to see if anybody has any questions. I'm happy to answer.
Naman?
We also had another position that was unfilled because someone left, right? Do we want to make sure that that role is filled before? I guess we can do both concurrently, but like I'm wondering if filling that role would like still require.
Can I just?
I'm not entirely sure what my question is.
Can I just clarify, Naman, that role has actually already been posted and actually went live on the university website on Wednesday. This is for a creation of a new role, which is why I'm bringing it to board for approval.
Yes, yeah, okay. I think my question like didn't make sense. It's fine.
Okay.
We can probably have a little further discussion on, I think, the spirit of your motion a little bit later in confidential session. Okay. I guess, are there any other questions for Suzanne on this motion? Also, Marie, we are not voting right now. Okay. Seeing none, anyone opposed to this motion? I'll ask that people do not type in the chat while we are voting. Matthew? Okay. Anyone abstaining from this motion? Okay. Then item passes unanimously. Okay. Next thing is also Suzanne 1. I will move. Can I get a seconder? Matthew seconds. Okay. Take it away again.
Great, thank you, Steph. I don't think there's an actual motion. I think this is.
Oh, okay. Whoops.
No, that's okay. We just wanted to bring it forward as we're working towards collecting some information and really reviewing the legal support and its effectiveness. Looking at the contract that would be, I think, finished in August of 2024. We're looking to ask student care for some information from them and looking to see if the board has any additional questions or data that they'd be interested in us collecting to help them make that decision when it comes forward, I guess. And that can be ongoing. It doesn't have to be in the moment. Please feel free to reach out and just send me whatever between in the next little while. I'll let you know when we're actually going to send it out, what the deadline date would be. So.
Do you have a general sense of the deadline date, like more or less than 2 weeks from now?
Probably a couple of weeks max, yeah.
Okay.
So if folks could get that to within the week, that would be helpful to put it together and send it.
Okay, cool. Naman?
I was wondering if questions like question 3 are like possible to answer without being invasive to the student's privacy.
I'm guessing, but I would assume that student care would not give us information that would breach anyone's privacy. And so if we ask a question that would create that issue, I would imagine they wouldn't answer it.
Okay. Yeah, just checking because I was like, wait, that sounds like something I might not want to tell everyone. Yeah.
Well, Alana, you may have a response as well.
Alana?
Not. Okay.
Suzanne, I'm wondering if you happen to know ahead of time, but when the answers, when we receive them from this, I guess in what format do you expect board to receive this information? Like, would we be anticipating that it comes during confidential session or during normal session or like a mixture of the two?
I'll go with the safe answer and say a mixture of the two. Because I don't actually know. I haven't thought really that much further past other than probably creating a report from those answers to provide board.
Okay.
Oops, sorry.
Matthew?
Sorry, I realized I was assuming this was the case, but then, it wasn't, technically in here. Is any amount of like polling of like students a component of doing this sort of look back on the legal service? Although it might follow later, just because I know that that's something that's been talked about internally for a little while, is just that, we want that. Sometimes the reports that we get from students about their experience with legal service is different from what student care tells us.
Definitely. Matthew, this is sort of step one, just to delve in to get some front end information, because I don't think as an org we've had that information. We've got great information for the health and dental service, but not necessarily is great a data for the legal service. So
what I thought. Very cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Only other thing I would suggest you adding, and it's a weird discrepancy that I've heard of from students, but I've been told that in cases where someone launches a countersuit against a student, that it isn't covered by the legal service. So let's just say in cases where a student is trying to get money back from a landlord because they got kicked out or whatnot for reasons that are in breach of the law. If that individual tries to countersue for something, I have been told by people who have used the service that that is not covered. So if we could do a little bit more digging as to what's going on there, I think that would also be appreciated, because to me that feels like a big gap in the service. If you have like funding for one thing, if there's always like a risk of someone countersuing and you not being able to have legal representation from that, that seems like a very big problem. Okay. Anyone else have anything? Okay. Seeing none, I guess we'll move on to the next item, which is just a recurring item, which is communication between student governance and at-large body. So I guess just a little bit of an update on that front. You'll see that the update with the what happened during the most recent January board meeting has now been posted. Not much progress, I believe, has been made since, but it is still something on top of mind. Elections, a lot of effort and a lot of work went into making sure students were aware of elections, running different events and campaigns and opportunities for students to know. Obviously, the election turnout wasn't quite what we wanted, but from someone who works within the office, albeit not directly when it comes to trying to get the election turnout, like people did work very, very hard on this, and a lot of significant effort went to that. So just wanted to say thank you to all the staff who were involved in that. I know it can be a little bit discouraging not to see the turnout that we wanted, but I firmly believe as an individual that that was not due to lack of effort. I guess, were there any questions and comments on this item right now? Less so as it relates to elections, because I believe we're gonna add a additional item for that. Naman.
Yeah, I was wondering how progress has been, or if there has been, on stuff that was previously discussed, like the idea that was floated about a mailing list for interested students.
Mike, would you happen to have an update on that? If not, I will check in with Melissa and we can email an update sort of afterwards.
The only update I know is that comms is investigating implementing such mailing list. I do not know what stage they're at. It's just that was sort of in the future plans and was not going to be able to fold into this cycle, is what I last recall.
Okay, that's fine. Good to know. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Seeing none, and also I am realizing now that this wasn't actually a motion. This was a discussion item. So exhausting that item, we can move on to other business. So does anyone have any other business they would like to discuss? Mon, this is where you do the thing.
Is this where we talk about? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have to say that you want to talk about it, and then we need 2/3, and then we can add it.
Yes. Sorry, I was struggling with the unmute button again. It's like when you click on a tab in Firefox, it like mutes the tab, which is very weird. Anyway, yes, I would like to talk about election turnout. Can we talk about election turnout, please?
If we have a seconder.
I'll
Fleeting
second it.
emoji. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll just phrase the motion as motion to add a discussion on election turnout. Seconded by Angela, firsted by Naman. Okay. If I'm going to take that item by consensus. And seeing no complaints here, I am going to take that we have a 2/3 majority, and then we can talk about it. So go ahead. Matthew?
Why don't you let Naman go first?
Okay, sorry,
Figured
your
he
hand
moved
went
it.
up first. That makes sense. Naman?
Yeah. Yeah. From the ERC meeting, I remember hearing that the election turnout is a way lower percentage because the way it worked was roughly the same number of people voted as in the previous election, but you know, all the people who got enrolled in the fall term got added to like the total number of eligible voters. So given that roughly the same number of people voted, even though we have way more people on campus, seems to okay, yeah, seems to imply that, I don't know, roughly the same people are voting. I don't know how true that is, but like it seems like there is like a small circle of people who are like engaged with the WUSA, and despite our best efforts, and I know that there were so many efforts. I walked in SLC every day, and I saw the efforts. They were like, they were really trying hard, and despite that, I don't think we seem to be reaching the students. Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know what a solution is here. It's something that I don't think should be the case. I don't know. Make students more aware of the things that affect them and that they have the ability to change it somehow.
I'm going to insert myself in the speaking order after Matthew.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts on this sort of thing. Number one is just like putting the, our election in context. For some reason or another, people don't seem to want to vote so much right now. We're in it's a little bit different with actual government elections, but not that dissimilar, I think, in the spirit of it. And things like the recent municipal election, provincial election, a very, very low turnout, unfortunately, as well as I know other student associations are having a low turnout issues as well, although there are some outliers. And young people have always not voted a lot, but they're voting less nowadays than young people used to vote. So a lot of those kind of pressures that are somewhat external to our activities. Separately from that, reflecting on the specifics of our election, we had uncontested officer positions, which I imagine is much more of a headliner than director positions. That was great to see the competitiveness that we had there. And I know in the past, even if there were some competitive council elections, we really found that that turnout was pretty heavily related to was there competition in the exec roles, because they really are the big headliners. So as that develops, or there become other ways to encourage more officers to run, or just more officers run as people get adjusted to the system and it becomes more well set up, that's something that may help us on its own. Another thing that is, I think, a sort of interesting piece is part of the original governance review report recommended us offering training and education sessions into how WUSA works and what the role of a director is more in depth, in a more like actually teaching sort of way, and training ahead of the close of nominations, so that anyone interested is going to have some background into the role and how it functions and a little bit more understanding. And I think that if that was something we looked at exploring further in the future, we'd be looking at a suite of candidates that are able to make platforms that are a lot more like engaging and relevant to what they can actually do, and like, you know, hopefully capturing the imaginations of students, because you know, this year, for example, we had a lot of candidates that were, you know, that cared and were passionate, but not a lot of understanding of how the system worked came through. And you know, that's always been true with old council elections and such, but also, you know, they had a lot of the same relatively boilerplate things to say, and them having the opportunity to have a greater amount of education into how the system works and what they can do, I think means that they'll have more interesting and engaging platforms that will better capture the imagination than you know, 22 candidates all saying, I'm going to work on mental health, but I don't know how. So it's sort of a couple of things that I was thinking about that I think are useful going forward.
I said I was gonna go after Matthew, so I'm gonna go after Matthew. Yeah, I'm like thinking of this, I guess, what is prudent from a board perspective to be doing. And Melissa is currently unavailable, but she did prepare an elections recap preliminary document for me. And what I would encourage board do would be to ask for a report on everything that we did and other findings and information so that we can sort of strategize on that front. So if that is something we would like to submit a motion to that end to, that would probably make the most sense. Just in general, though, from what I've observed, like it was a mixture of seeing low turnout, but like worryingly so. There were candidates without profiles, which, like, to me is like one of the most clear way that you would engage with folks, and it didn't seem in some cases that the folks who won were necessarily the ones who had the profiles, and I'm not sure if they just had greater reach elsewhere, but it is a little bit worrying to me for us to have representatives who their ideas are not publicly accessible to the students as a whole. That seems a little bit weird to me. We also just didn't see a lot of turnout engagements at some of the events that we were running. So, you know, we offer a lot of opportunities for folks to sort of step up and engage with students, and folks aren't taking them. And I see that as an issue as well, which I think opens a question of, hey, maybe it's a requirement for if you're running to have something about yourself be posted and have some sort of engagement, because I think like it is very, you know, it sort of suggests to me that if you can't put in the work, then you're not going to put in the work later. I think students deserve to know what their candidates are about, but that's just my thoughts. But yeah, there's, I guess, like the issue of low election turnout, like all over the place. And I think the best way to figure out like why people aren't voting is to ask them and to have conversation about that. So there is some onus for us to figure out what to do. On the other end, I think it's like a mixed responsibility from everyone, from the candidates to be engaging with people, to be educating themselves about what the role is, but also from students to getting out and vote, because we can, you know, be as in your face as you want about the elections, but if people aren't responding, like we can't make them, and it sucks. It really does. But you know, I am sort of against mandating voting. But yeah, anyways, to that end, I'd like to add a motion that board requests to receive a report from the relevant staff recapping actions taken to increase election turnout, and also just some trends and things that were noticed. Can I get a seconder for that?
I have a speaking term, but I also second.
Okay, actually, I'm going to withdraw my thing and then I'll word it after you go.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I was just gonna like say a few things. About turnout, like I know it's hard to get young people interested in elections, but like other student governments seem to be doing a better job than us, I think. Like I read this article in the Queen's Journal the other day, and they had like 17% turnout, which is like still not great, but like it's like an order of magnitude above us, right? So I don't know, more would be nicer, and like more seems to be possible. As for why students aren't engaging, the most common thing that I have personally heard is students thinking that what WUSA does is not relevant to them, or what WUSA does is like unrelated to their student experience, which I suppose the most direct way of remedying that is just telling them what we have done and what we have achieved. I don't know if they would listen. Yeah, that's.
Okay, I'm putting a motion in the chat. Can I get a seconder? And I'm on seconds. Okay, any discussion on that motion? Going once, going twice. Okay, anyone opposed with the motion? Anyone abstaining? Cool. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. I also need, oh, come on.
Yeah, I had one more thing to note. In the past, I have observed, I guess it's just mostly anecdotal. I have observed that people seem to care more when like execs were like running together, like as a team. Like I remember Team Duck Duck being like super popular. I remember before that there were like a bunch of people who ran together, and even in the article that I posted in the chat, you know, all the teams were like the names of the initials of the three execs. Like all the teams were named like that. So like I guess execs running together and I don't know, synergizing somewhat helps. This may be relevant to what Matthew said about a competitive exec election bringing more turnout. So maybe that's something to think about. Also about exec elections. I remember there being a discussion about how an exec being a full-time role might turn people off from running for that position. I remember Rania being in that position some time ago. You know, sometimes it's not possible for people to take on a full-time role, and it might be worth considering if it is possible to scale back the duties of an executive or distribute it among the directors such that executives are not such a burden to take on as a role.
Denver.
That was actually, I believe, a recommendation of Richter and Hughes originally when we started this process. It was, and I see Matthew nodding, so I'm sure he'll have some comments around this. It is something that I've thought about just because I thought it was an interesting suggestion. I would say at this point, my experience has been it's too early to make a call whether we do something like that. I think, you know, in 2 years, maybe WUSA could evaluate that, but I would say kind of get through this element of governance first, because I'm just right now, I think there are some gaps that are being plugged by President VP that in future, you know, if things are running the way intended, might not need to be, but also I think there's a lot of things. Oh, sorry, folks. I think there's a lot of things in the, like, even just day to day that, like, I don't know. The way I'm looking at these roles right now, I think that I could have 2 full-time staff under me and still have things to do. Like just it's there's that space for work to happen. So I think there's a longer conversation that needs to have about how these roles would be reined in to fit into, say, 25 hours a week is really what I'm saying. And I think that would need to be a long discussion, and there'd need to be a lot of pertinent bodies to ensure that we're not creating gaps or creating a space where those folks just aren't really fulfilling the role. But it begs the question of what the role looks like. Sorry, that was really long-winded. I apologize.
Rania?
Yeah, sorry about the background noise. I'm just walking home because I had to go somewhere else for work. Okay, so one of the suggestions that I had, I understand that like distributing the exec responsibilities, or like scaling them back could take a lot of time and discussion. But I was wondering if it would be possible to distribute the exec responsibilities among the directors as well. Mostly because I don't really think, okay, I'm gonna be completely real. I think that directors are getting paid a lot and the action is not really equating to the pay. And I know that people want to do work. I know everybody on the board wanted to make a big contribution, which is why everybody ran. So I was wondering if it would be possible to kind of distribute those activities among directors. Like maybe execs don't have to be the only one that have to go and lobby, and kind of like other things. Yeah.
It's admittedly a little bit tricky. I think it warrants a longer conversation, but I'll say I guess I'll say two things here. One of them is it's very tricky with all of your like schedules to be able to do things. Like even just trying to get people to go to different meetings is just insanely hard. And a lot of how we interact with different stakeholders, Denver and I, relies on us being like largely available. So there's some consideration that needs to be given into that because it's actually a huge administrative burden to figure that out. The other end is the way that our staffing, I'll speak in like very general terms here, but like the way that like our contracts and et cetera work makes it, I guess, a little bit difficult to fully adopt the model in terms of the expectations of what staff can take on, because if we don't have like a full staff complement who are going to stick around for like a longer term period, like if we always have turnover there, like currently with some of the turnover that's being filled by the student exec in a way, and I feel like that's another barrier that needs to be addressed in order for the system where people pull out a little bit work better. There's also a bunch of consequences on our ability to lobby effectively, just because the bigger players in the advocacy sphere, federally and provincially, are the ones who are more available. Again, there are other ways to fill those gaps and do that. You could potentially hire on contract recent graduates, so you still have those student perspectives and that you're hiring based a little bit more on skill. That's some ways to get around it, but I do think it's like a broader conversation and not as simple as you would think. Denver?
Hi, folks. I'm partially responding to Catherine's message in the chat as well, but I'll highlight the other kind of issue that I see with potentially pulling back on roles like this is this interesting element of, I think it takes a lot to just understand what's going on within this org, Catherine. So, it might look like extremely built out training in transition. But I think there is an element of it. sometimes it is hard when we have some of our student roles to just plunk them into spaces and say, hey, you are going to, sit on this committee, or you are going to do this thing and be an expert on this, without a lot of transition and background. Particularly, that can be an issue with people who do their jobs for a living. So I would say an example of an interaction might be if we plunk a board member in front of some sort of long-term staff within the university, and the board member saying, hey, we want this, this, and this, and the long-term staff just really doesn't see eye to eye on it. It's very easy to push around somebody who might not have all the answers. That brings up, this argument of, well, we should have pro staff at all of these meetings, which I think makes sense. But then it kind of begs the question of, why is a student leader there if they're not going to be informed enough to contribute meaningfully to a conversation? So there's a little bit of a chicken and the egg here. I think like this concept is a good idea, but I think we need to build out the training. We need to build out the staff resources. We need to build out all the supports for it to be able to happen and not leave students out of the conversation if we do things in this way. I do also raise a point, Rania, to it's interesting because I was, I look at attendance for every one of these meetings. We're very seldom full. We're normally missing a few folks. So it's interesting to hear the comment around, folks are very well compensated and, they're not really putting in a lot of hours. Because even some of the mandatory pieces, I know folks are missing, or quote unquote mandatory. So it also begs a question of, we would have to set up, I think, better systems of accountability to ensure the people that are put in those roles, if we increase the responsibility, are matching and meeting that responsibility. So I'm not actually speaking either way on this. I'm just kind of highlighting all the things I've thought about with this. So open to folks' comments, questions. I see Steph said last comment on this, hands up now. So also, if folks just want to PM me, I'm happy to chat about it further after, because I really think it's something WUSA should think about long term. I just don't think we have, I don't think at this moment we're ready to make changes around this.
If we have no motions arising on this, waiting to see if anyone says, no, wait, Steph. Okay, then we will move forward. Can I get someone to get us into confidential session? I need someone